Welcome to an Introduction to Python, Lesson 4 with me, Rich Cooper. We'll begin with appending to a list. We'll start with a blank list called a list. I'm using a for loop to repeat a piece of code 5 times. This code will ask for an input and then append that input, in other words, add it to the end of the list. Note how the code I want to repeat is indented one tab. Outside of that initial loop, I'll create another for loop, this time to print all of the items in the list. Let's see how this works. You may want to pause the video now and practice what you've learned. I can use the for loop to do more than just print items in the list. I can actually do something to each item in the list. In this case, I'm going to convert each item in the list to uppercase using the .upper command. Changing case can be done to any string variable, and as our list contains only strings, we can carry out this operation on all of the items in the list. In this case, I'm going to change the case to title case, which will mean each word, each string starts with a capital letter. This could be useful if you're trying to clean data inputs. We can convert text to upper, lower, or title case using similar commands. Okay, so we can append items to a list. Now let's have a look at removing items from a list. We first define the list, or use an existing list. Adding a print statement here is not necessary, but it helps us see the output so we can see what the program's actually doing and if it's working correctly. Notice I put a print statement before I make the change and after. Note that Rich has now been removed from the list. Lists also have the attribute sort. This can be used to sort items into alphabetical order. We can also sort them in reverse order. This will work just as well with a list of strings as it will with a list of numbers or floats. Oops, looks like I forgot to add an extra print statement. Sort is a built-in Python function, but I will be covering sorting algorithms in future videos. If we want to know how many items a list contains, or indeed the number of characters that a string contains, we can use the len command. There are 6 items in our list, so the program should return the value 6. It's important not to confuse the length of the list with list indexes. The index of the last item in the list will be equal to the length of the list minus 1. Here I'm using a variable to store the length of the list. Len names will be an integer variable because lengths of lists can only be integers and not floats or strings. Append will add an item to the end of a list, but what if we want to put an item into another position in the list? Well, in that case we use the insert attribute. Insert, we can insert an item to any point in the list as long as we know the index where we want to insert it. The index can be specified, in this case index 0, the first item, or it can be calculated from another item already in the list, as I will show in a moment. Insert an item after Alison in the list. First of all, I need to get the index for Alison. So you just use the index command to do that and then assign it to the variable index. Because the index I want to insert at is the one after Alison, I just type in index plus 1 and then the value that I want to insert. Oops, looks like I forgot to put my print statement in again. And as you can see, Simon has been successfully inserted into the list after Alison. We can ask questions about what's in the list. If an item is in the list, the program will return the value true, otherwise it will return the value false. True and false are a separate data type in Python called bools, and we'll be using these more in later lessons. I'll now write a short program allows the user to input a name which will then be searched for in the list. If the item is in the list, we'll get a message, otherwise we'll get a different message. To do this, I'll be using if and else. If else is known as selection in programming. We'll be using if and else a lot more in later lessons. Note the use of indented code. Name found is only printed if the search variable is in the list, otherwise name not found is printed. Python uses a built-in function to search for items in lists or characters in strings. However, I will be covering basic searching algorithms in later lessons. Please forgive the terrible spelling in my comments. So let's recap. In Lesson 3, we learned how to define lists and that lists can contain different data types or even other lists. We can obtain list indexes, slices and concatenate lists. And in this lesson we've used to append, index, insert, remove and use the len command to determine the length of lists. Join me in Lesson 5 where you'll apply what you've learned.